Welcome back, and if you're just joining us, welcome to our election studio where Nigeria decides. Now, in this segment, INEC's candidates list is our focus.
Omissions of Rivers and Zamfara State APC candidate has raised continuous issues of concern. Joining us now to address the issue is Mr. Ngozi Akandu. He is a legal practitioner at Laradon, not a barrister. Thank you very much for joining us. Adewale Ademola, a public affairs analyst. Good evening and thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
So let's go straight to the issue. Now, we know that INEC released a list, and in that list, we did not find governorship candidates for Rivers and Zamfara. And they listed reasons for it.
From the APC to be particular.
From the APC, yes. And INEC did reaffirm that they would never go against the courts. They are duty bound to obey court orders. But as we speak right now, there seems to be another court order. So I'll start with you, Mr. Akandu. What actually led this case being taken to court? Because this is an inter-party issue. It's not necessarily the party versus INEC. It was an inter-party situation.
But even inter-party relationships are regulated by rules and regulations. And those rules and regulations, if you flout them, the only way you can seek redress is you go to court. Because sometimes when you bring these inter-party issues, among the hierarchy of the party, and they don't, respond to you the way you wish, the only way the option you have is you go to the court. And the courts have done their duties by, giving interpretations here and there, giving their, rulings here and there, and you must obey court orders whether you like it or not.
Ademola, quickly now, we've heard conflicting judgments from when appeals are being made. So how do we also marry these different conflicting reports? Because one now questions whose judgment takes precedence?
By hierarchy of the courts and currency of judgments. If, as at yesterday, Court A said this, and today a higher court comes up with another judgment, by hierarchy, the newer judgments by the higher court will stand. So just this afternoon, what we got was that at the Rivers State, the Court of Appeal Port Harcourt, what we got was that the court has nullified the stay of execution that made INEC not to include the gubernatorial candidates of an APC in the scheduled governorship election. So by that, INEC would automatically be made to go ahead to include that. But like you narrated earlier, the issue though was an internal issue within the party. But like my learned colleague and fellow said, as much as it is internal, legislation is legislation. It is universal, and there is a dictum of interpretation that governs and guards every act of any regulated society. So irrespective of the fact that it was within the party, but in as much as human beings and parties' interests are represented, a superior interpretational authority would always lay issues to rest.
Take us through this interpretation, because at the end of the day, when we look at Zamfara and Rivers states, yes, the indirect and direct primaries were conducted, but the court says, well, you didn't do it properly, so it's null and void. So
not that the court said. Parties within the party took themselves to the court, challenging the respectively conducted party primaries, like you would if you were conversant.
According to the court's judgment, finally,
the court now nullified it because it was contentious.
What makes it contentious?
Mr. Akandu, you are a legal practitioner. A lot of times people say the court or the judiciary half the time is participatory in some of the problems that we have going forward in our electoral process. Because before now, there were speculations that in the last minute, an appellate court might rule differently. But then let's also take into consideration the fact that INEC has printed these materials.
Administrative inconveniences.
And we know the tug of war that went on with the executive and the legislature on funds released to INEC. So it sounds a bit,
We can't
No,
marry
you
the
see,
two
it's a bit
it's just
confusing.
weird.
Yes, you know, one thing you shouldn't dispute is the fact that for every legal question, there's a double perspective.
Interesting.
And now you must take it to a place for interpretation for it to be adjudicated upon. Now the question that comes up here is, one of the decisions was taken by a state high court, and then another decision was taken by a federal high court. Now there is a conflict of decision because the state high court and the federal high court are, courts of coordinate jurisdiction. None is superior to the other. But at the end of the day, you still have to look at Section 251 of the Constitution,
And what does that say?
which now gives exclusive jurisdiction to a particular court to adjudicate on a particular issue. Now, I believe, and I believe that the federal high court has a greater, jurisdiction to deal on especially the Zamfara state issue than the state high court. What I expected when the matter was taken to the state high court was for somebody to raise an objection and say this court does not have jurisdiction. In all the stories I've been reading, there was no instance where an objection was raised as to the jurisdiction of the state high court. Right. Now, two conflicting rulings have been given. At the end of the day, it must go higher.
So when we're talking about free, fair, credible elections, now if we have these omissions, how does it affect the contest for power? Because at the end of the day, if one party is well omitted, it now leaves the other one, quote unquote,
with the upper hand.
Yes, with the upper hand.
I think that is what is a bit enlisting the sympathy of the judiciary here. You understand? Because going by what has been up until now, this party, by virtue of your internal wranglings and rancors and inadequacies, you were unable to meet up with the deadline of INEC. But unfortunately, several legal contentions emanated and they are being attended to. Ordinarily, like you said, for the administrative stress of getting all these documents in place, it shouldn't just be a tea party that some few days or some, because by now, if you go closer to INEC, by now most of those documents will have been concluded by printing.
The election,
you understand?
yes.
But you see, the judiciary is a bit sympathetic just because of this you have said. Because if, like a whole state...
Should that be the judiciary's position? Should they be sympathetic? Because if we start being sympathetic,
honestly,
then it means that our judiciary is somewhat compromised.
No, you may not say it is compromise, because I applauded something initially, because for it to be an issue affecting APC states, when APC is at the center, I never thought INEC could have gotten this far with it. But I applauded the government at the center. You understand? It's a lot of kudos to the government at the center.
Yes.
Because for the presidency this time around, to stay off the old rancor, allowing them to worry and INEC to take position. But now, having taken a position, you wouldn't see democracy at work if in a state like Rivers, the entirety of the followership or supporters of APC do not take part in deciding who becomes the governor. That is why, in a particular school of thought, democracy though is good, but it's never the best form of government. You will recall the former the last Ekiti State governorship election. See, of a volume of over 480-something thousand, 4-point-something million, only 480 went voting. 10%. So that apathy alone does not make a representational governance. But
that happened not because of anybody, not even the opposition. It wasn't the opposition's fault. Sure. It was a failure of the party in itself. So why should everybody else be held to ransom because of that?
Just the judiciary is just being sympathetic. By my understanding,
the rules remain the rules, and we're not going to start bending the rules because of anybody. Now, if you have any internal issues in your party, should you now begin to affect or disturb all of us because of it? A timetable had been given, and the timetable was given in accordance with the rules, legally prepared rules, and so on and so forth. Now you go back into your house, and then you begin to cause rumbles and cause fights amongst yourself. How are you going to expect us? You see, with the development we have in the APC now, and with the position INEC is taking, I am very, very confident that despite what has been happening in the past few days, we expected a kind of, tilt towards, let's say, APC, without missing words. But you see the INEC, taking a position that, appears as if APC is not going to get away with anything these days. It gives a little encouragement.
Well, it is still 12 days to the election, and anything can happen as we see.
Things are happening already.